The Senate chamber was dim, the lights were low, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch endlessly across the room. It was a place that usually buzzed with activity, but tonight, it was eerily quiet, almost as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Shadows stretched across the room. A lone figure stood. The figure was resolute, standing tall amidst the encroaching darkness. It was a scene that could have been pulled from a dramatic painting, a solitary beacon of light in a sea of shadows. The figure's presence was commanding, drawing the eye and holding it, refusing to be ignored. Senator Cory Booker's voice was hoarse but strong. Each word he spoke seemed to carry the weight of the world, echoing through the chamber with a resonance that was impossible to ignore. His voice, though strained from hours of speaking, held a power that was undeniable. It was the voice of a man who knew the importance of his mission, who understood the gravity of the moment. He had been speaking for hours. He was fighting for millions. His words were not just for those in the room, but for the countless individuals whose lives hung in the balance. Each sentence was a lifeline, a desperate plea for justice and fairness. The passion in his voice was palpable, a testament to his unwavering commitment to the cause. Millions who were about to lose their healthcare. The air crackled with tension. Outside the chamber, the streets were filled with protesters, their voices rising in a chorus of defiance and hope. They held signs and banners, their faces a mix of determination and fear. They were fighting for their lives, for their families, for their future. The Republicans were furious. They wanted to silence him. Their faces were etched with frustration and anger, their eyes burning with a desire to end the filibuster. They saw Booker as an obstacle, a roadblock in their path. But he was more than that. He was a symbol of resistance, a reminder that some battles are worth fighting no matter the cost. But Booker would not be silenced. He knew the stakes were too high. He stood his ground, his resolve unshaken. He was fighting for something bigger than himself, for a cause that transcended politics and partisanship. He was fighting for justice, for equality, for the very soul of the nation. His determination was a beacon of hope, a light in the darkness. This was about more than healthcare. This was about justice. This was about America. It was a fight for the values that defined the nation, for the principles that had been fought for and defended for generations. It was a reminder that the struggle for justice is never over, that the fight for equality is a constant battle. And in that moment, in that dimly lit chamber, Cory Booker stood as a testament to the enduring spirit of resistance and hope. Donald Trump had promised to destroy Obamacare. From the campaign trail to the Oval Office, he made it clear that dismantling the Affordable Care Act was a top priority. He argued that it was a failed system, one that burdened Americans with high costs and limited choices. His rhetoric was fierce, and his supporters cheered at the prospect of its repeal. He called it a disaster. In speech after speech, he painted Obamacare as a catastrophe, a policy that was sinking the nation. He claimed it was a broken promise, a lie sold to the American people. His words resonated with many who felt left behind by the healthcare system. But for millions, it was a lifeline. For those with pre-existing conditions, it meant they could no longer be denied coverage. For young adults, it allowed them to stay on their parents' insurance plans until age 26. For low-income families, it provided subsidies that made healthcare affordable. It was a safety net that caught those who would otherwise fall through the cracks. It meant access to affordable healthcare. It meant that a sudden illness or accident wouldn't lead to financial ruin. It meant that people could get the care they needed without having to choose between paying for medicine or paying for food. It was a system that, while not perfect, provided hope and security to millions. It meant peace of mind. Knowing that they were covered, families could focus on living their lives without the constant fear of medical bankruptcy. It allowed people to pursue their dreams, start businesses, and take risks, knowing that their health was protected. It was more than just a policy, it was a promise of a better, healthier future. The Republicans in Congress rushed to do Trump's bidding. They saw an opportunity to fulfill a long-standing goal of the party, to reduce the role of government in healthcare. They argued that the free market would provide better solutions, that competition would drive down costs and improve quality. They were determined to repeal and replace Obamacare, no matter the cost. They drafted a cruel bill. The proposed legislation would cut funding for Medicaid, eliminate subsidies, and remove protections for those with pre-existing conditions. It was a plan that would leave millions without coverage, a plan that prioritized budget cuts over human lives. Critics called it heartless, a betrayal of the most vulnerable. It would strip healthcare from 22 million people. It would gut Medicaid. The elderly, the disabled, and low-income families would be hit the hardest. Rural hospitals, already struggling, would face closure. The ripple effects would be felt across the nation, from small towns to big cities. It was a plan that would deepen the divide between the haves and the have-nots. It was a heartless attack on the most vulnerable. Those who depended on Medicaid for their daily care, for their medications, for their very survival, would be left out in the cold. The homeless, the mentally ill, the working poor, all would suffer. It was a stark reminder of the power of policy, and the real human lives that hang in the balance. Cory Booker refused to stand by. He would fight back. As a senator, he had seen firsthand the impact of Obamacare on his constituents. He had heard their stories, their fears, their hopes. He knew that this was a battle worth fighting, a cause worth championing. He took to the Senate floor with a mission: to expose the cruelty of the proposed bill, to rally support for those who would be affected. He would use the Senate floor to expose this travesty. With passion and conviction, he spoke out against the bill. He shared stories of real people, of families who would be devastated by the loss of coverage. He called on his colleagues to consider the human cost, to think beyond politics and partisanship. He was a voice for the voiceless, a champion for the vulnerable. He would show the human cost of this bill. Through emotional testimonials and powerful speeches, he painted a vivid picture of what was at stake. He reminded the nation that healthcare is not just a policy issue, but a moral one. It is about dignity, compassion, and the fundamental right to live a healthy life. In the face of adversity, Cory Booker stood firm, a beacon of hope in a time of uncertainty. Booker's voice boomed through the chamber. He spoke of his constituents, people like Jessica, a single mother battling cancer, people like Michael, a young man with diabetes struggling to afford insulin. He read their stories, their pleas for help, their fear of what would happen if this bill passed. The Republicans tried to shout him down. They called him a grandstander. But Booker wouldn't be deterred. He spoke for those who couldn't speak for themselves. As the hours ticked by, Booker's energy never wavered. He paced the floor, his voice filled with passion, his words resonating with the weight of history and the urgency of the present moment. Each step he took, each gesture he made, was a testament to his unwavering commitment to the cause. The Senate chamber, usually a place of decorum and formality, was transformed into a battleground of ideas and ideals. Booker's voice, rising and falling with emotion, echoed through the halls, a clarion call for justice and equity. He spoke not just as a senator, but as a man deeply connected to the struggles of everyday Americans, a man who understood the pain and the hope that defined their lives. He spoke of the history of healthcare in America, a history marked by fierce debates and hard-won victories. From the early days of rudimentary medical practices to the modern era of advanced healthcare, the journey had been long and arduous. The archival footage of hospital scenes and vintage healthcare protests served as a stark reminder of the battles fought and the lives impacted. Booker highlighted the milestones, the setbacks, and the relentless pursuit of a system that could serve all citizens regardless of their socioeconomic status. He painted a vivid picture of the past, a tapestry woven with the threads of struggle, resilience, and hope. The long struggle for universal coverage was not just a political issue, it was a moral one. Booker drew parallels between the fight for healthcare and the broader civil rights movement. The black and white photos of people marching for civil rights, the footage of healthcare reform rallies, and the historical footage of the signing of Medicare and Medicaid were powerful visual testaments to the interconnectedness of these struggles. He spoke of the visionaries and the activists who had paved the way, the sacrifices they had made, and the legacy they had left behind. The quest for universal coverage was, in essence, a continuation of the fight for equality and justice. The moral imperative to care for the sick was at the heart of Booker's message. He spoke of the ethical responsibility that society had to its most vulnerable members. The hospital scenes, the images of doctors treating patients, and the protests for healthcare rights underscored the urgency of the issue. Booker argued that a society could be judged by how it treated its sick and its poor. He called for compassion, empathy, and action, urging his colleagues to rise above partisan politics and to embrace a higher calling. The moral imperative was clear: to ensure that every individual had access to the care they needed to live a healthy and dignified life. He quoted Martin Luther King Jr., invoking the powerful words of the civil rights leader to underscore his point. Of all the forms of inequality, injustice in healthcare is the most shocking and inhumane, King had said. Booker also quoted Mahatma Gandhi, whose philosophy of nonviolence and social justice had inspired movements around the world. The historical footage of these leaders speaking to crowds, their voices filled with conviction and hope, added a profound depth to Booker's speech. He connected their timeless messages to the present struggle, reminding everyone that the fight for healthcare was a fight for human dignity and justice. He spoke of the American dream, a dream that promised opportunity and equality for all. The footage of Booker speaking, the American flag waving during a speech, and the montage of diverse American citizens illustrated the rich tapestry of the nation. Booker emphasized that the American dream was not just about economic success, but about the fundamental rights and freedoms that allowed individuals to pursue their happiness. He argued that healthcare was an essential part of this dream, a basic right that enabled people to live their lives to the fullest. The American dream, he said, was about building a society where everyone had the chance to thrive. The promise that all are created equal was a cornerstone of Booker's speech. He spoke of the founding principles of the nation, the ideals that had shaped its history and its identity. The footage of diverse people holding hands, the civil rights protests, and the celebrations of American ideals captured the essence of this promise. Booker argued that true equality could only be achieved when everyone had access to the same opportunities and resources, including healthcare. He called for a renewed commitment to these principles, urging his colleagues to work together to build a more just and equitable society. The belief that everyone deserves a chance to live a healthy life was the driving force behind Booker's impassioned plea. He spoke of the countless individuals and families who struggled to access the care they needed, the disparities that existed, and the urgent need for reform. The footage of healthcare workers treating patients, diverse families at a doctor's office, and community health clinics highlighted the human side of the issue. Booker called for a healthcare system that was inclusive, compassionate, and just. A system that recognized the inherent worth and dignity of every person. He ended his speech with a powerful reminder that the fight for healthcare was a fight for the soul of the nation. Section 5 Hour 10, A Nation Watches. Word of Booker's marathon speech spread like wildfire. #Stand with Booker trended nationwide. People across the country were glued to their screens, inspired by his courage, moved by his compassion. Senators from across the aisle came to stand with him. They offered words of encouragement. They asked questions to give him a chance to rest his voice. They knew he was on the right side of history. Section 6 Hour 15, The Light Doesn't Fade. Finally, after 15 grueling hours, Booker's voice fell silent. He had spoken longer than any senator in decades. He had poured his heart and soul into this fight. He had given it everything he had. The Republicans were unmoved. They passed their heartless bill. But Booker had achieved something remarkable. He had shone a light on their cruelty. He had awakened the conscience of a nation. Section 7, Echoes of Hope. Booker's speech may not have stopped the bill, but it had a lasting impact. It galvanized the opposition. It inspired a new generation of activists. It showed the power of standing up for what's right. The fight for healthcare was far from over, but Booker had given people hope. He had shown that even in the darkest of times, one person can make a difference. Section 8, A New Generation Rises. Cory Booker's stand became a rallying cry. Across the country, people were inspired to get involved in politics, to fight for social justice, to make their voices heard. They organized protests. They contacted their representatives. They donated to causes they believed in. They understood that democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires active participation. Section 9, The Fight Continues. Cory Booker's marathon speech was a defining moment in American politics. It was a testament to the power of one person to make a difference. It was a reminder that we are stronger when we stand together. The fight for a more just and equitable America continues, but thanks to leaders like Cory Booker, the future is bright. We must never stop fighting for what we believe in.